In the summer of 1945, humanity unlocked a power that once belonged only to the stars. A power that could incinerate cities, rewrite the rules of war, and end civilization as we knew it. Millions around the world have just witnessed the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the brilliant, conflicted father of the atomic bomb, brought to life in Christopher Nolan's epic film. But what if I told you that the true dread of the atomic bomb, the full psychological weight of its creation and its horrifying legacy, is far more profound and terrifying than any movie can fully capture? This Anatomy of Dread documentary will conduct a deep psychological autopsy on the minds that built the atomic bomb. We will dissect the intense moral dilemmas, the unimaginable pressure, and the chilling real-world impact of a weapon that changed humanity's destiny forever. We will not just tell the story of a man, but the anatomy of the greatest scientific dread in history. Forget the cinematic drama. It is time to meet the true monsters of our own making. It is time to confront the true dread of the atomic age. Our story begins not with a single man, but with a terrifying global race against annihilation. The year is 1939. Europe is plunging into the abyss of World War II, and in the scientific community, a chilling discovery has just been made. Nuclear fission, the splitting of the atom which promised limitless energy, also offered the terrifying possibility of an unimaginably powerful bomb. From a psychological perspective, this discovery ignited a profound, universal dread among scientists. The fear was not just of the bomb itself, but of who would build it first. The chilling prospect that Nazi Germany, led by a genocidal regime, might be the first to harness this power, cast a dark shadow over the free world. It was a race against time, with the fate of civilization hanging in the balance. Enter J. Robert Oppenheimer, the brilliant, complex theoretical physicist. Christopher Nolan's film paints a vivid portrait of his intellectual prowess and his internal struggles, but the true psychological pressure on Oppenheimer and his peers was immense. They were being asked to create a weapon of unimaginable destruction, not for conquest, but out of a desperate fear of what the enemy might do. It was a moral paradox. To save the world, they might have to destroy it. The Manhattan Project, the top-secret American effort to build the atomic bomb, was a colossal undertaking. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and workers were assembled in remote, desolate locations like Los Alamos, New Mexico. They worked in an atmosphere of intense secrecy, paranoia, and relentless pressure. Many were young, idealistic individuals who believed they were fighting for freedom, but they were also creating a tool that would forever change the definition of warfare. This was a unique dread. These were not soldiers on a battlefield. They were intellectuals, artists of mathematics and physics. Forced to confront the most brutal ethical questions of their lives, they were pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, knowing that their success could lead to either salvation or unimaginable catastrophe. The initial motivation was clear: stop Hitler. But as the war progressed, and Germany was defeated, the target shifted. The atomic bomb, once conceived as a defensive weapon against Nazism, was now aimed at a different enemy, and with that shift came a new, deeper layer of moral conflict and existential dread that would haunt the scientists, and Oppenheimer most of all, for the rest of their lives. They had opened Pandora's box, and the true horror was only just beginning to unfold. At precisely 5:29 a.m. on July 16, 1945, in the desolate Jornada del Muerto desert of New Mexico, humanity unleashed the sun on Earth. The Trinity test. This was the moment of truth for Oppenheimer and his team. The culmination of years of relentless work, ethical debate, and unimaginable scientific pursuit. From a psychological perspective, the experience of witnessing the first atomic detonation was a moment of profound, existential dread. The scientists, despite all their calculations, were utterly unprepared for the sheer scale of the power they had unleashed. It was a light brighter than 1,000 suns, a heat that could be felt miles away, and a sound that rattled the very core of their being. J. Robert Oppenheimer famously recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita: "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." This was not just a dramatic quote, it was a genuine, terrifying realization of the moral precipice humanity now stood upon. The film Oppenheimer captures this moment with chilling accuracy, showing the stunned, silent awe mixed with palpable horror on the faces of the men who had just witnessed the dawn of a new, terrifying age. For many of these scientists, the initial jubilation of success was immediately overshadowed by a crushing sense of responsibility and fear. They had proven it could be done. The abstract equations had become a horrifying reality. The theoretical potential for mass destruction was now a tangible, usable weapon. The dread was twofold: the dread of the weapon itself. The atomic bomb was not just a bigger bomb, it was a weapon that defied conventional warfare, capable of annihilating entire cities and their populations in an instant, leaving behind not just rubble, but a radioactive wasteland. It introduced the concept of mutually assured destruction, forever changing global geopolitics. The dread of humanity's capacity. They had not just split the atom, they had split the moral fabric of human civilization. They had created a tool that could bring about self-annihilation. The question was no longer, can we build it? But should we have built it? And what will humanity do with it? The Trinity test was a success beyond measure, scientifically, but for the minds that conceived it, it was a moment of terrifying revelation. They had seen the face of ultimate power, and it was a reflection of their own genius, now tinged with an inescapable shadow of guilt and a profound, collective dread for the future of mankind. The atomic age had officially begun, and with it, a new era of existential fear. 3 weeks after the blinding flash of Trinity, the theoretical dread became a horrific reality. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was dropped on the city of Hiroshima, Japan. 3 days later, Fat Man followed, detonating over Nagasaki. These were not just acts of war. They were events that etched an indelible scar onto the consciousness of humanity. From a psychological perspective, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki introduced a new, unthinkable scale of human suffering and destruction. Before these bombs, warfare, however brutal, involved armies clashing and cities being bombed incrementally. The atomic bomb changed everything. It was instant, total annihilation. The immediate aftermath was unimaginable. Tens of thousands of people vaporized in an instant, buildings flattened. Those who survived the initial blast faced a slow, agonizing death from radiation sickness, a silent, invisible killer that continued to torment its victims for decades. The images, though censored and rarely seen in their full horror, speak volumes. The ghost-like shadows of people etched into stone, the charred landscapes, the bewildered burned survivors. The dread was not just in the death, but in the indiscriminate nature of it. This weapon did not distinguish between soldier and child, combatant and civilian. It was a weapon of total destruction, targeting entire populations. This broke every moral boundary of warfare and created a new kind of terror. For the scientists who created it, especially Oppenheimer, the news of the bombings brought a complex mix of emotions. There was relief that the war might end, quickly followed by immense guilt and horror at the devastation. Oppenheimer, in particular, was visibly shaken by the photographs of the devastation. He felt a profound sense of personal responsibility, stating, "The physicists have known sin." This was the true psychological toll of their success. The world recoiled in horror. The use of the atomic bomb instantly transformed global politics, ushering in the Cold War, a new era of constant fear where humanity lived under the shadow of its own ultimate self-destruction. The bomb became a symbol of humanity's terrifying genius and its capacity for ultimate self. The cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki became more than just historical sites. They became eternal monuments to the dread unleashed that summer. They stand as a chilling reminder that the line between scientific triumph and existential horror can be tragically thin. The war may have ended, but the true, terrifying legacy of Oppenheimer's creation had only just begun to unfold, forever altering the anatomy of human fear. With the devastating power of the atomic bomb unleashed upon the world, the focus shifted from its creation to its creators, especially J. Robert Oppenheimer. The film Oppenheimer powerfully portrays his post-war struggles, but the true psychological and political persecution he endured was a profound and tragic extension of the dread he had helped to unleash. From a psychological perspective, Oppenheimer was a man deeply tormented by the consequences of his genius. He had famously declared, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," and this sentiment haunted him for the rest of his life. He became a vocal advocate for international control of atomic energy, desperately trying to rein in the monster he had helped create. He argued against the development of the hydrogen bomb, a weapon even more powerful than the atomic bomb, believing it would escalate the arms race to an unsustainable and suicidal level. This moral stance, however, placed him in direct opposition to powerful political and military figures in the burgeoning Cold War era. As the United States and the Soviet Union embarked on a terrifying nuclear arms race, Oppenheimer's calls for caution and control were seen by some as disloyalty, even treason. The dread he faced was no longer just the abstract terror of scientific discovery, but the very real, personal terror of political persecution. In the highly paranoid atmosphere of the McCarthy era, his past associations with communists and his dissenting views on nuclear policy made him a target. He underwent a brutal and humiliating security hearing in 1954, where his loyalty was questioned, his character assassinated, and his security clearance revoked. The psychological impact of this public trial was immense. Oppenheimer, a man who had led one of the most vital scientific projects in history, was effectively stripped of his influence and publicly ostracized. He was condemned by the very government he had served, sacrificed on the altar of Cold War paranoia. The father of the atomic bomb was silenced, his warnings about the dangers of nuclear proliferation largely ignored. This period reveals a crucial aspect of the anatomy of dread, how a society, gripped by fear of an external enemy, can turn on its own heroes. Oppenheimer became a scapegoat, a symbol of the dangerous intellectual who questioned authority. His personal suffering was a stark illustration of the moral complexities inherent in scientific advancement, and the brutal consequences for those who dared to grapple with them. Oppenheimer lived the rest of his life as a shadowed figure, revered by many, but never fully regaining his former influence. His story is a chilling reminder that creating the instruments of dread can have as profound and destructive an impact on the creator as it does on the world. He witnessed firsthand how the genie he had let out of the bottle would not go back in, leaving him with an inescapable burden of guilt and a haunting dread for humanity's nuclear future. And so, the true dread of the atomic bomb, and the tormented life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, is laid bare. Christopher Nolan's film is a monumental achievement, a complex portrait of a genius grappling with the consequences of his creation. It brings Oppenheimer's story to a global audience, allowing millions to peer into the crucible of human ambition and scientific terror. But the real history, the psychological weight, and the terrifying legacy are far more profound than even a 3-hour epic can fully capture. Hollywood, by its very nature, must compress, dramatize, and find a narrative arc. It gives us a hero, a clear conflict, and a powerful personal struggle. From a psychological perspective, the film Oppenheimer masterfully conveys the intellectual dread and moral dilemma, but the true, existential dread, the feeling that humanity permanently altered its own trajectory towards potential self-annihilation, that is a harder monster to portray fully on screen. The movie, for all its brilliance, must focus on the man, but the anatomy of dread compels us to look beyond the individual, to the collective. The dread of the atomic bomb is not just Oppenheimer's dread, it became humanity's dread. It is the chilling realization that we now possess the power to end ourselves, a power that cannot be unlearned, cannot be uninvented. The film serves as a powerful reminder of this turning point. But the true, horrifying truth is that the nuclear genie, once out of the bottle, fundamentally reshaped every aspect of human existence. It gave birth to the Cold War, a decades-long standoff where the entire world lived under the shadow of a nuclear winter. It forced us to confront our own capacity for ultimate destruction. Oppenheimer himself, despite his personal tragedy, continued to warn the world. His life became a testament to the moral struggle that defined the atomic age. He was a man who created a weapon, then spent his life grappling with the burden of its existence, ultimately silenced by the very fear it had engendered. And this is the final, chilling lesson from our investigation. The story of Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb is not just history, it is a permanent chapter in the anatomy of human dread. It teaches us that some scientific triumphs come with an unimaginable moral cost, and some creations forever alter the very definition of survival. The dread of the bomb is not over. It is a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of our modern world, a perpetual reminder of the power we wield and the fragility of our existence. And so, the final investigation is now passed to you. After dissecting the genius, the guilt, and the global impact, what do you believe is the most enduring psychological legacy of Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb on humanity? Leave your analysis in the comments below. Let's continue the discussion about this monumental moment in history, because the story of Oppenheimer teaches us that sometimes, the greatest dread is not from an external monster, but from the terrifying power within ourselves.